Resident Evil is filled with monsters. Some are remembered because they're unstoppable, others because they're terrifying. And then there are creatures like Morio, a towering harpoon-wielding bioorganic weapon that stalked the survivors of the Sonido de Tortuga Island incident. Throughout Resident Evil Heavenly Island, Morio feels less like a traditional monster and more like a force of nature. No matter where the survivors run, he always seems to be there. He survives falls that should kill him, tears through anyone who stands in his way, and becomes one of the deadliest threats on the entire island. But what makes Morio so memorable isn't his strength. It's the story hidden beneath the mask, because before he became a monster, Morio was just a normal man named Eliseo Mabou. He was a brother, a son, and someone who genuinely wanted to make life better for the people around him. His story begins years before the outbreak ever reached Sonido de Tortuga Island, and by the time it ends, it becomes one of the most tragic stories in the entire Resident Evil universe. Long before anyone knew the name Morio, Eliseo Mabou was one of the most respected young men on Sonido de Tortuga Island. Unlike many of the island's residents, Eliseo left home to study overseas. His goal wasn't fame or money. He wanted to return with the knowledge and skills needed to help his community. By all accounts, he was a good person, someone who cared deeply about the people around him, and especially about his younger sister Marilou. After finishing his studies, Eliseo finally returned home, and for a while, everything seemed normal. But then, he disappeared. No explanation, no clues. One day he was there, and the next he was gone. And as months turned into years, most people eventually accepted that Eliseo would never return. But Marilou never completely gave up hope. What she didn't know was that somewhere beneath the island, hidden inside a secret research facility, her brother was being transformed into something far worse than death. And before long, the entire island would pay the price. The answer to Eliseo's disappearance was buried deep beneath Sonido de Tortuga Island. Hidden below the island was a secret research facility connected to Alex Wesker, one of the most dangerous minds in Resident Evil history. For years, the facility conducted illegal bioweapon experiments far away from the eyes of the outside world. Among those experiments was something known as the Kodoku Project. The idea behind the project was brutally simple. Researchers would infect human test subjects and transform them into bioorganic weapons. Those creatures would then be forced to fight, hunt, and kill one another until only the strongest survived. Each battle generated more data. Each survivor became stronger, and with every new mutation, the researchers moved closer to creating the perfect weapon. At some point after returning to the island, Eliseo became one of those test subjects. Exactly how he was captured remains unclear, but what happened afterward changed his life forever. The virus twisted his body, transforming him into something inhuman. Yet, unlike many of the other subjects, Eliseo's transformation didn't go entirely according to plan. Before the researchers could fully condition him, he escaped, and that mistake would have enormous consequences. Most BOWs are carefully programmed and controlled. Morio, however, never received the full process. Only fragments of his conditioning remained, including directives to eliminate strong opponents and prevent anyone from leaving the island. The rest was left unfinished, and as a result, something unusual survived the transformation. Pieces of Eliseo's personality remained buried beneath the virus. The researchers saw him as an incomplete experiment, a failed weapon. But years later, the survivors trapped on Sonido de Tortuga Island would discover just how wrong they were, because the creature that emerged from the Kodoku Project wasn't simply another monster. It was the beginning of Morio. Years after his disappearance, Eliseo Mabou was almost unrecognizable. The Kodoku Project had transformed him into a towering bioorganic weapon known as Morio. Hidden beneath a mask and a long trench coat, the creature cut an intimidating figure. He carried a massive harpoon, capable of impaling targets from a distance, and dragged a heavy anchor attached to a thick chain, using it both as a weapon and as a tool to pull himself toward prey. Even among Resident Evil's many monsters, Morio stood out. Unlike ordinary zombies that wandered aimlessly, Morio actively tracked people. He stalked them through forests, waited in the shadows, and seemed to appear whenever survivors thought they were finally safe. For years, he remained somewhere on the island, evolving and surviving while the Kodoku Project continued in secret beneath the surface. But then, everything changed. The island later became the setting for a reality television program known as Idol Survival. Contestants, crew members, and staff arrived expecting a harmless competition. Instead, they found themselves trapped in the middle of a bioterror nightmare. As a deadly outbreak spread across the island, Morio emerged from the shadows once again. People began disappearing. Survivors were attacked, and entire groups were wiped out before they even understood what they were facing. Among the victims were numerous contestants and crew members, including Coco and Kylie, while others barely escaped with their lives. At one point, Morio even attacked the White Castle cruise ship and destroyed its engine room, helping cut off one of the survivors' few possible escape routes. Before long, stories about the mysterious harpoon-wielding monster spread across the island. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody understood where he came from. They only knew one thing: if Morio was hunting you, running probably wouldn't be enough. And for two survivors named Takeru Taminaga and Yuki Mayu, that realization was about to become terrifyingly personal. As the pair searched for answers and tried to stay alive, Morio repeatedly crossed their path. Every encounter seemed worse than the last. One moment, they would think they had found a safe route. The next, the towering figure would emerge from the darkness with a harpoon in hand. The constant threat of Morio transformed him into something more than just another bioweapon. He became the island's boogeyman, a monster that survivors whispered about, and a monster that never seemed to stay down. The longer the outbreak continued, the more terrifying Morio became. He wasn't simply attacking people at random. He was tracking them, following them, and studying them. His actions often felt far too deliberate for a creature that was supposedly nothing more than an experiment. At the time, nobody understood why. Eventually, Takeru and Yuki found themselves cornered atop a cliff overlooking the ocean. Their options had run out. With Morio closing in, the pair climbed into a nearby tree and desperately tried to remain hidden. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might actually escape detection. But then, Morio found them. The creature had followed them all the way to the cliff. What followed was one of the most intense confrontations of the entire incident, because when they realized they couldn't remain hidden forever, Takeru chose to confront the monster directly, and the struggle quickly spiraled out of control. During the fight, both Takeru and Morio were sent over the edge of the cliff. Only a rope secured around Takeru's waist prevented him from plunging into the ocean below. Slowly, he began climbing back towards safety, but then something moved beneath him. Morio wasn't dead. The creature had survived the fall and was already trying to climb back up. Using his massive anchor like a grappling hook, Morio dug into the cliff face and began pulling himself upward. With only seconds to react, Takeru lashed out and knocked the anchor free. The chain slipped, the creature lost its grip, and Morio disappeared into the ocean below. This time, there was no sign of him resurfacing. No movement, no roar, nothing. For the first time since the outbreak began, the survivors allowed themselves to believe the nightmare might be finally over. Morio had fallen hundreds of feet into the sea. Surely nothing could survive that. But Sonido de Tortuga Island still had plenty of secrets left to reveal, because sometime later, the survivors would discover something far stranger than Morio's survival. They would discover what he had been doing all this time when nobody was watching, and that discovery would completely change how they viewed the monster. Sometime after the confrontation at the cliff, the survivors made a discovery that completely changed the way they viewed Morio. Deep within a cave settlement hidden on the island, they found evidence that someone had been living there. At first, that didn't seem unusual, but then they realized who had built it: Morio himself. The settlement was populated by infected villagers, many of whom had already lost what remained of their humanity. Yet despite their condition, they had been gathered together and sheltered inside the caves. That sight raised an obvious question. Why? A bioorganic weapon wasn't supposed to build villages, it wasn't supposed to care about anyone, and yet that was exactly what appeared to have happened. And as the survivors explored the area, a disturbing realization began to form. Somewhere inside the monster, fragments of Eliseo Mabou were still alive. The village itself was a tragic reflection of the life he once wanted to protect. Years earlier, Eliseo had left the island, hoping to return with knowledge that could improve life for his people. Now, after being transformed into a monster, he appeared to be trying to protect those same people in the only way he still understood. The infected villagers were beyond saving. The settlement was little more than a crude imitation of a community, but the intention behind it was impossible to ignore. Even after years of mutation and violence, some part of Eliseo still remembered where he came from. Some part of him still remembered the people he cared about. It's one of the most tragic aspects of Morio's story, because it shows that the virus never fully erased him. The monster remained, but so did pieces of the man. Unfortunately, that discovery didn't lead to a peaceful resolution. As the survivors fought their way through the infected inhabitants of the settlement, virus began spreading throughout the caves, and before long, much of the makeshift village was engulfed in flames. When Morio returned and saw the destruction, his reaction was immediate. The creature became enraged. To the survivors, they had simply been trying to stay alive. To Morio, they had destroyed the closest thing he had left to a home, the closest thing he had left to the community he once loved. And with that, the hunt began again, more aggressive than ever. But this time, Morio wasn't the only monster roaming the island, because elsewhere, another survivor of the Kodoku Project was emerging from the shadows, a creature known as Shrabe Daemon, and before long, the truth about both monsters would finally be revealed. As the outbreak continued to spiral out of control, help finally arrived on Sonido de Tortuga Island. BSAA agent Parker Luciani and his team were dispatched to investigate the disaster and extract any survivors they could find. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived, the island had already descended into complete chaos. The survivors were exhausted, the infected were everywhere, and hidden among them were two of the deadliest creatures the Kodoku Project had ever produced, Morio and the mysterious Shruba Daemon. Before long, the two monsters crossed paths. The confrontation was brief but brutal. Both creatures had survived years of experimentation, mutation, and combat. Watching them clash made it clear just how dangerous the Kodoku Project had become. The battle only reinforced a terrifying reality. These weren't ordinary bioorganic weapons anymore. They were survivors, the strongest creations produced by years of forced evolution. As the survivors pushed deeper into the island's hidden facility, they finally encountered one of the last remaining researchers connected to the project, Dr. Dirk Miller. For the first time, someone was willing to explain what had really happened on Sonido de Tortuga Island. Miller revealed the full truth behind the Kodoku Project. The experiments, the human test subjects, the endless cycle of monsters fighting and consuming one another in order to create stronger viral strains. And then he revealed something that shocked everyone. Morio wasn't simply one of the project's creations. He was one of its greatest successes. Years of survival had made him stronger than almost every other test subject on the island. The creature everyone feared had effectively become the ultimate survivor of the Kodoku Project. But that wasn't the revelation that hit the hardest. According to Miller, Morio's true identity was Eliseo Mabou, Marilou's missing brother. After years of searching for answers, Marilou finally learned what had happened to him. He hadn't abandoned his family. He hadn't chosen to disappear. He had been captured, experimented on, and transformed into a monster. The revelation cast every previous encounter in a completely different light. The village he built, his strange behavior, the moments where he seemed far more intelligent than other bioweapons. For years, fragments of Eliseo had been fighting to survive beneath the virus, and Morio wasn't the only victim. Miller also revealed the likely identity of the Shruba Daemon. The creature had once been a man named Lopez, someone who had known both Eliseo and Marilou before the outbreak. Like Eliseo, his life had been consumed by the Kodoku Project, until almost nothing remained of the person he once was. Suddenly, the monsters terrorizing the island weren't just monsters anymore. They were victims, people whose lives had been stolen and twisted into weapons. But before anyone could fully process the truth, the situation inside the facility took another turn. A betrayal was about to unleash the final stage of the nightmare, and Morio's story was approaching its end. As the survivors struggled to make sense of everything they had learned, the situation inside the hidden facility rapidly deteriorated. The Kodoku Project was collapsing, the island was falling apart, and one of the survivors revealed she had her own agenda all along. Zilly, who had spent much of the incident posing as another victim, finally exposed herself as an operative working for Shenya Pharmaceutical. Unlike everyone else, Zilly wasn't interested in escaping the island. She wanted the Kodoku Project's research. Using the facility's systems, she forced Dirk Miller to activate a special extraction process designed to harvest the evolved strain. Before anyone could stop her, Morio was captured. Massive restraints slammed into place around his body as a mechanical claw dragged him onto an extraction platform. The strongest survivor of the Kodoku Project was suddenly powerless, and as the procedure began, the virus was forcibly removed from his body. Years of mutations, years of evolution, everything the project had worked toward, all being ripped away in a matter of minutes. And once the process finally ended, Morio collapsed motionless. For a moment, it looked like his story was over. Zilly had obtained exactly what she wanted, and with the virus in her possession, she was eventually forced to inject herself with the harvested strain after suffering a fatal injury from falling multiple stories onto the ground. The results were catastrophic. Within moments, her body began mutating into a massive abomination far beyond her control. The very power she sought to obtain had consumed her. As the survivors fought for their lives against the newly transformed Zilly, an unexpected figure returned to the battlefield. Morio himself. Against all the odds, he had survived, weakened and damaged, but still alive. And during the battle, the truth that had been hinted at throughout the entire story was finally revealed. Morio's mask was destroyed. For years, the creature had hidden behind it. Now, everyone could see the face beneath. It was Eliseo Mabou, Marilou's missing brother. There was no longer any doubt. The monster that had terrorized the island, the creature that had hunted survivors across forests, beaches, and cliffs, the monster everyone feared, had once been her brother. Yet what happened next is what truly defines Morio's story. Faced with the chaos unfolding around him, Eliseo made a choice. He didn't attack the survivors, he didn't lash out in confusion, and he didn't continue acting as the weapon the Kodoku Project had turned him into. Instead, he turned his attention toward Zilly, toward the true threat. In that moment, the humanity that had lingered inside him for years had finally surfaced. The same protective instincts that had once driven him to care for his village, the same devotion he felt toward his sister, and the same selflessness that defined him before he ever became a monster. For the first time in years, Eliseo wasn't acting like Morio, he was acting like himself. As the battle raged on, he fought the mutated Zilly head-on, giving the survivors the opportunity they needed to finish the fight. And that opening was all Claire Redfield needed. Taking aim with a rocket launcher, Claire fired directly at the creature. The explosion engulfed the battlefield. When the smoke cleared, Zilly was dead. The nightmare of the Kodoku Project was finally over. And with it, so was the story of Eliseo Mabou. After years trapped inside a body that wasn't his own, after years spent as a monster, his final act wasn't one of violence, it was one of sacrifice. And in doing so, he proved that no matter what the virus had done to him, it had never completely taken away the man he used to be.